are the must-haves for doing your own oil change. Oil funnels, socket wrenches, extensions. I use synthetic oil because I have over 75,000 miles. I actually have 140,000 miles. I use full synthetic because it's good. That's my oil filter clamp that I clamp on there to remove and put the oil filter back on. Those are the 4 spark plugs, the new ones that I'll be swapping out for the old ones. I have a 2.4, a 4-cylinder motor, so I have 4 spark plugs. That's the oil filter, and I'll show you how it looks a little later. That's the air filter, and I always change out all the filters and whatnot when I do the oil change. As you can see, my oil pan off to the side has a plastic bag over it. The reason I put a plastic bag is because it makes it easier to take it to AutoZone or Pep Boys, the oil, when I'm done doing the change. That's my antifreeze, the coolant. I always swap that out, top off the fluids, windshield weather fluid. I like to start by draining the oil, and then I'll go do my spark plugs. If you can see that nut, that's where the oil drains. I like to use the socket wrench rather than a regular crescent wrench. Just because it fits more snug around the boat, and also sometimes it may get a little oil on the boat, and with a wrench it might strip the nut out, and you don't want that. So that's why I use the socket. I get a rag because sometimes I'll drop the nut or a wrench in the oil, and then I'll have to wipe it off. So what we do, we just break it, push it away from you, and you'll want to be on the right hand side of it so the oil doesn't get to you. So I'm gonna break it a little. As you can see, glad no oil was in there. Just cranking it off. It shouldn't be hard at all. And what you also should do is run your vehicle for a couple minutes so the oil can heat up, and it makes it easier for all the bad oil to come out. Here we go, it's ready to shoot off there. The only thing holding it is the gasket, which kind of melted on the oil pan. Here we go, you ready? See it? Here we go. There it is. That's the oil coming out. Sometimes it shoots out. Sometimes it just comes out that way. Right in that oil pan, that's just how you want it. And what I like to do is just let it drain as long as I can. And then what I'll do is I'll go change the air filter and get started on the spark plugs. Then I'll come back down here and I'll take off the oil filter while this is draining. So that's the oil filter right here. And there's a certain tool that you can use to take that off. So this is the housing to my air filter. I have 2 clips that are broken on the front, so I've been using 2-inch C-clamps to hold it in place. But as you can see, I'm pulling the old air filter out. It's a little dirty there, and I always change it. There's a new one there. Here it comes. Slide that baby right in, clamp it down a little bit, and then I'll apply the 2-inch C-clamps, which is in place of the broken latches that go on this air filter housing here. So I'm just cranking that down, and then I'll crank the second one down, and then move on to the next, which is prepping the spark plug removal. So this plastic casing with the 2.4L, that's the cover for my motor, and the spark plugs are held under there inside the motor. So I'll just pop this bad boy off, and inside of those at the bottom are the spark plugs. So we'll need a certain type of tool to get in there and pull those out. Now I've decided here to move on from the spark plug job and start removing the oil filter. As you can see, the oil is still draining out slowly from the pan, and right up above you, you see that black shiny thing. That's the oil filter, what I showed you before. And I'll put the oil filter clamp on there. Got to line it up the right way. Then I'll start removing. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. Now you can see it turning a little bit. It's a job because the angle that you have to adjust the oil filter uh, tool is kind of hard, but with due diligence and a little elbow grease, you can get it done. Now it's hand tight, so I can release this oil filter with my hand. Now you see the oil coming out, and you want to drain this in the same oil pan that you're using to drain the main oil pan, the oil for the main oil pan, and it'll drip out slowly because we drain most of the oil out of the main oil pan already, but you still need to remove this because you're going to reapply the new one in due time. So we're back at the top of the motor now, and I'm going to remove each screw to each spark plug hub, but I'm not going to remove all the spark plug hubs at the same time. I'm going to do one individually because I don't want to get mixed up in which spark plugs I've completed and which ones that I have not. So I'll start with one and finish that one, then move on to the next. So I'll pull off the electricals so nothing gets tangled up or I don't pull anything off of where it's supposed to be. I'm going to grab my socket wrench with the extension, but first I'll show you the spark plugs. That's the box of spark plugs. Four come in this box. So here I come with the socket wrench with the extension with the 5/8 head. It's magnetized, so it latches on to the spark plug. So that way, when the spark plug is totally loose, it doesn't drop back in the engine, and it'd be difficult to get out. So I'll just break it with the ratcheting tool, the ratcheting wrench, and then when it's loose enough, I'll just loosen the rest with my hand. That way I don't cross-thread anything, and the same applies when you're putting in the new spark plug. So I'm just loosening, and then you'll know when it's time to pull it out. There it is there, the old spark plug. Time to put the new one in the head. There it is. These come pre-gapped for your model vehicle. And then I'll hand tight that bad boy right in. And then apply the wrench when it's tight enough. There I am, doing it hand tight. Just making sure it's tight enough. It's all threaded perfectly. And there it is there. Now reapply the wrench and crank it down a little bit. You don't want to crank it too hard. You don't need to crank it too hard. You just crank it like a quarter turn, if that. So I'll put the hub back in and attach the power. Push that bad boy back in. You hear a little clamp, and that's how you know you did it right. Put the screw back in. Drill that bad boy down, and move on to the next. Oil filter. So now I grab the new filter, stuck my finger in the old oil, and rub my finger with the old oil around the thread of the new filter. So that way when it's time to take it off, it won't be super hard. And it's just good to keep it lubricated, the threads and whatnot, because it gets really hot under there, and you don't want anything binding or getting stuck. So now it's time to reapply the locking nut to the oil pan, and it's still dripping a little bit, the oil, but that's fine. Most of the oil ran out already. So I'm just locking this screw nut in, hand tight, and then I'll grab my 13 millimeter socket wrench. I'll put that on there, and then I'll lock it down however many turns it takes. Once I get it kind of snug, I'll go like a half turn. That way I know nothing's gonna drip out. Now I'm removing this so I can put in the new oil. I've already put on the oil filter and the oil nut at the bottom, so now I can apply my Advanced Full Synthetic 1040. I use this because I have high mileage, over 75,000 miles. I actually have 140,000 miles, but I've actually been using full synthetic since I've had about 25,000 miles. And it just helps with the performance of the vehicle. It helps the motor function properly. And it's just good for me to apply full synthetic to my vehicle. It just makes me feel better. It's a little more expensive, but I think it's worthwhile. It's done me justice. So I use full synthetic every chance that I get. I also change my oil every 3,000 miles. I do a full tune-up every 3,000 miles. I change my transmission fluid every 60,000 miles. So I've already done it 2 times. So I'm probably due for a new one. And the plan for me is to not have a blown engine and have to buy a new car, whether it's buying a used car for $1,000 or buying a new car with a new car note. It's very important for me to not have to get in debt. So I try to take care of everything that I have to the utmost because it just matters so much more. I'll be saving money for me and my family if I just do the right things and take the right steps.